Hey guys, and welcome to another video talking about how we can use systems of equations to model these real-world situations. And so in this situation, we have graduated from college and your parents finally lay down the law and tell you got to get your own cell phone. So of course, you research some of the lower cost cell phone providers. Who can blame you? And you narrow your search down to two cell phone providers, Boost Mobile and Cricket Wireless. And here's how much they cost. They each do an unlimited talk and text package, but then each charges you per gigabyte that you use. So for Boost Mobile, you can get $40 unlimited talk and text, and then only $5 for every gigabyte of data you use. Cricket has an even cheaper base price for unlimited talk and text, but then it costs more for every gigabyte of data you use. Now, ultimately, we're going to ask ourselves this question: which cell phone company should we go with? And that's going to depend. And to get there, let's start by creating an equation, one for each of these, describing the costs. First things we got to do, and per usual, if you think you could do this, or if you want to give it a try, pause the video and give it a try. But then if you need help or if you want to check, that's the time to go ahead and go through the video. So the first thing we need to do is define some variables. And I'm going to use our very standard x and y. And x, our independent variable, is going to be the number of gigabytes that we use. And what depends on that? Our dependent variable, which is going to be the cost of that cell phone plan. So we're wondering about like the monthly cost. Okay, so for Boost Mobile, which we're going to do in red, the monthly cost starts at 40 bucks, right? That's your unlimited talk and text package, and then it costs $5 times however many gigabytes you use. $5 per gigabyte times however many gigabytes you use. Boost Mobile, which we will do, Cricket Wireless, which we will do now in green, well, the cost starts a little lower. It starts at only $28 for that unlimited talk and text, but the cost per gigabyte of data is higher, 8 times x. Okay, so now let's do some kind of evaluation of the two options. Well, if we knew that we were going to use only 2 gigabytes of data every month, which plan would be the better plan? Well, for Boost Mobile, if you use only 2 gigabytes of data, that month would cost you 40 bucks for unlimited talk and text, plus $5 for each of those 2 gigabytes used. So 40 bucks for talking text, 10 bucks for data, 50 bucks altogether. So that's for Boost Mobile. For Cricket Wireless, the cost would be, it's 28 bucks for talking text, and then $8 per gigabyte, but for only 2 gigabytes. So $28 plus 16 for a grand total of $44 a month. So if you know that you're going to use only around 2 gigabytes of data every month, you should go with Cricket Wireless because it costs less than Boost Mobile. And we're going to assume that cost is the only factor we're considering, that they both have the exact same coverage and the same phones and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, let's see what happens if we now go from using just a little bit of data every month to a lot of bit of data. So what if you are prone to watching lots of YouTube on your phone, and you know that you're probably going to use around 6 gigabytes of data every month? Now, does that change things? Are we going to want to change our cell phone provider? Well, the only difference is that for both Boost Mobile and for Cricket Wireless, we're now going to evaluate how much it's going to cost for 6 gigabytes of data. Okay, so for Boost Mobile, the monthly cost is going to be 40 bucks for talk and text, plus 30 bucks for that data, for a grand total of $70 a month. For Cricket Wireless, your monthly cost is going to be 28 for talk and text, plus 48 for that data, for a grand total of $76. So if you know that you're going to use a lot more data every month, then you should go with Boost Mobile because it costs less per $5 per gigabyte of data. And that was enough to kind of outweigh the fact that you paid more for talk and text. Whereas earlier, if you only used a couple gigabytes of data, you wanted to go with Cricket Wireless because that low talk and text cost was enough to keep this lower. So of course this begs the question, is there a time when they cost exactly the same amount? Is there a number of gigabytes that you could use in a month that would make these two monthly costs exactly the same? Well, let's check it out. If these costs are the same, then I claim that the cost of Boost Mobile and the cost of Cricket Wireless are, well, exactly the same. And so what we need to do is set up an equation equating the cost of Boost Mobile with the cost of Cricket Wireless. And note to self, what we're doing here is exactly the same strategy if we were just given a system of equations just like this with two variables and we said, please find the x and y values that make this true. We're just asking, find how many gigabytes it would cost for them to be the same, and what would that cost be? Okay, so let's actually go ahead and solve this equation right here. I think I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. I think we end up with 40 equals 28 plus 3x. Subtract 28 from both sides. 12 equals 3x. And so we find that if we were to use exactly 4 gigabytes of data every month, these costs would be exactly the same. And what would that cost be? Well, let's see. 4 gigabytes of data. So 5 times 4 is 20, plus 40 is 60. Okay, so it costs $60 with Boost Mobile. Supposedly it should be the same for Cricket. Let's make sure. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 28 is also 60. So for 4 gigabytes of data, these two are going to cost the exact same amount, and they're each going to cost $60. So of course, the ultimate question here is, which one do we choose? What's going to be the best option for us? Well, I think it totally depends on how many gigabytes of data we use. And let's see now. So remember that on the left-hand side, this was the cost function for Boost Mobile in red, and this over here on the right-hand side was the cost function for Cricket Wireless in green. And so my claim is, if you want to figure out when Boost Mobile will be cheaper, all we need to do is set up an inequality and say, boom, Boost Mobile is now less expensive. The cost of Boost Mobile is less than the cost of Cricket Wireless. And similar to the outcome we found when we set them equal to each other, you will find that, well, Boost Mobile will be cheaper when 4 is less than x, meaning Boost Mobile will be cheaper if you use more than 4 gigabytes of data every month, because then the cheaper cost per gigabyte of data, that'll be enough to keep it cheaper. Now, of course, if you want to find out when Cricket Wireless is going to be more expensive, or excuse me, the better option and therefore less expensive, for Cricket Wireless to be less expensive, we just set up this inequality. And this says, okay, well, what values of x, what number of gigabytes will make Cricket Wireless less expensive than Boost Mobile? And you find that, oh, in this case, it'll just be 4 is greater than x. So if x is less than 4, if you use less than or fewer than 4 gigabytes of data each month, then Cricket Wireless is going to be the better alternative because it's cheaper because of that lower unlimited talk and text fee. But I really want us to be able to discuss these situations both using equations and inequalities, but also using graphs. So what I have here on Desmos is a setup of some graphs of these situations. So on the horizontal axis is our independent variable, the number of gigabytes we use. On a vertical axis is our dependent variable, the cost of the plan. And so here's Boost Mobile, right? The unlimited talk and text was $40, and every 1 gigabyte we used, the cost went up $5. 1 gigabyte, $5. 1 gigabyte, $5. That's the slope of this line. Now, Cricket Wireless costs less to begin with. Its unlimited talk and text was only $28, but of course the cost per gigabyte of data was more, so eventually it's going to catch up and overtake Boost Mobile. When are they exactly the same? You guessed it, right at 4 gigabytes of data when both plans will cost exactly $60. For anything less than 4 gigabytes of data, we see here that Cricket Wireless is going to be cheaper. But for anything more than 4 gigabytes of data, we see that Boost Mobile is going to be cheaper. And we can also confirm this by looking at a table of values. This is nothing different from what we've seen before, but I really want us to be comfortable with being able to discuss these situations using tables, graphs, equations, and inequalities.